Hey guys, in this video I'm going to explain how every Pyro character got their vision in Genshin, as well as explain his counterpart Sephiroth in the Tree of Life. However, if you need more context as to how Sephiroths work, you could look at my Dendro video of the same series or my Light video of the same series. So there's quite a lot of Pyro characters, so I'm gonna try to make their stories as quick as possible, as well as not waste too much time in explaining this Sephiroth. So what is this Sephiroth? This Sephiroth is might and severity. It is about passion, but it is also about anger and violence and aggression. It is serious, calculated, and cautious. It's about strength of boundaries, setting limits, and self-control. In Genshin, this one is about war. As for Pyro's egotistical desire, in Genshin it is war, and in the Tree of Life it is might or severity. Pretty similar anyway. But you know that the egotistical desire is not how you unlock this vision. And you could pretty much tell that because none of the Pyro characters are actually on the battlefield engaged in a war to obtain this vision at all. The key action it takes to unlock this Pyro vision is supposed to basically be when something terrifies you to your core, but it also puts you in awe of it and inspires you at the same time. I'm not sure there's a word for this in the English language, but I guess you could kind of somewhat sum it up to courage, because courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. Courage means you are able to take the correct action in spite of your fear. There's a concept in Gnosticism that I've not really explained too well so far, and perhaps this is not the video to explain it in because there's a lot of characters that I have to go through. However, I've already missed out on explaining it in those videos, so it has to be done here. And it's the contrast between the opposing Sephiroths or opposing visions. So Pyro's opposing vision would be Hydro. And I have to bring this up because it's going to give a lot of people the misconception that they're just meant to destroy each other or clash with each other and be polar opposite. For instance, it's kind of like Hydro is about mercy. It's a king sitting on a throne casting judgment but forgiving a lot of time in Gnosticism, while Pyro is supposed to be like a king on a chariot on the battlefield, destroying those who oppose or aren't deemed worthy. So it can appear that these two clash with each other. For instance, also how Geo clashes with Electro, or how a Cryo clashes with Dendro. However, the whole point of this is they're supposed to work together. That's the perfect pair for each other. And I know what some may be thinking, that the resonance between these clash, they aren't supposed to be working together too well, right? For instance, let me give you a psychological example here. So let's say that an INFJ who's like an introvert who wants to stay inside and watch Netflix all the time or something like this, compared to something like an ENFP who wants to be outside exploring and going to the latest club or whatever all the time. They seem like they're not the perfect pair. They seem like they clash with each other. However, what it really does is if these two people are paired together, they bring balance to each other's life. So you're not going to be inside all the time or be out going to clubs all the time. You will do some of these things sometimes, and each side will gain more balance. You balance each other out. That's how it's supposed to be in the Tree of Life. Pyro is not supposed to clash with Hydro. They're supposed to bring symmetry to each other. They're supposed to bring balance to each other, equalize one another. Imagine if these two nations unified and worked together and ruled together. They would be more balanced there, instead of it just being so chaotic and so fixated on war or so fixated on justice or mercy or whatever. Together they can then give fair and empathetic justice or mercy, but if needed to, they can then give the correct sentence, even if it means war or destruction. Even further than just balancing these two opposing forces would be a council out of the archons of the remembrance. So there is pure balance on all levels, and then there would be the correct conclusion that's reached, and then they can come to the right resolution, rather than each one of their crazy and overly dramatic versions of what is the right way to do things. If not just a completely enlightened single person ruling over all, which is the story of the main character in the Gnostic tale. If we can complete this journey of enlightenment of Gnosis, we will be the overall ruler for the betterment and salvation of all, not for some selfish reason. But this is not about us, about the main character. This is about Pyro, so let's move on. One more quick note about Pyro before we move on to the stories is that Pyro's not the bad guy, they're not the villain, they're not the imposing force or whatever. They are destructive, however, it's not really without reason. For instance, it's not like justice. Like, Hydro is about casting judgment, right? And making sure they come to the correct resolution from their point of view with empathy in hand. Theoretically, it's supposed to be like that in Tree of Life. However, for severity, for this Pyro Vision, it's supposed to be more like you may be a friendly, happy, charismatic person, but when you see injustice, you are not going to forgive this. This is what Pyro is like. They are not merciful. They're the opposite of Hydro. They're the opposite of mercy. They're the opposite of justice. They are instead more like wrath. Alright, now on to the stories, and again I'm going to try to make them as quick as possible because there's quite a few of them. Alright, so first is Amber. So Amber became an outrider because she wanted to follow in the footsteps of her grandfather. However, she couldn't find any information or clues as to the reasons behind his choices, or why he suddenly left without word. Without having him or his notes around to have direction, she didn't really know what to do. That is until she flipped through an old book of fables. It said, "What you lack was not wind, but courage. It is the courage that has allowed you to become the first flying birds of this world." As much as Amber looked up to her grandfather, she realized that she shouldn't wait for directions from anyone else, but that she should instead be like those courageous birds that just spread their wings and flew into the blue skies. And so, trying to forge her own path forward, she thought to herself, there must be something that only I can do. There must be. And the moment she realized this is when a vision began to shine brightly at her hip. So there's a few things going on here that I want to explain. Let's start with courage. So even if you personally don't consider this to be a courageous action or thought, you know, for her it might have been, and which is the point. It's your personal courage, you personally standing up and facing something that you are afraid of. It's also supposed to be more than courage, because it has to be something that also inspires you at the same time. And you know, taking on a new task, or growing up and taking on this career, or moving to this new place, whatever, stuff like that, that is brave, that is scary, that is intimidating, especially when it's your very first time doing it, stepping out in the world and becoming your own person. It is scary. So her facing this head on her own is courageous in itself, and it did inspire her. Another thing I want to note really quick is that with these original characters, they really want you to notice that each of these characters have sovereignty and self-governance, which is an important step in itself to be able to unlock any Sephiroth, any vision at all. Without sovereignty and self-governance, like I said in the past, you can't get any vision at all, period. So in this moment in the story, she was not only courageously facing her future, but she also got sovereignty and self-governance, as well as she was inspired to figure out what she can excel at. And this is what granted her her Pyro Vision. Next is Bennett, and it says that his passion for adventure is unstoppable. He wants to constantly explore and challenge, sweat it out, and even eventually grow old on the adventurous path itself. So how exactly did he get his vision? Well, there was this one time where he ran into a true crisis. Bennett was in a dire predicament. Losing this much blood is not good, he thought. But Bennett did not want to stop. There is no reason to turn back, he thought. He believed that all this agonizing misfortune he had suffered up to this point in time was for overcoming this particular predicament itself. But at the very end of this hellish journey he had undertaken, he found absolutely nothing there at all. Though there was no treasure at the end of this adventure, he wasn't too disappointed, because to him it was more about the exploration and adventure and the overcoming of the obstacles within his path. This meant more to him than any treasure he could have found. In this very moment, his injuries finally caught up with him, and he finally lost consciousness and collapsed. When he finally had reawoken, he found that his wounds had been cauterized by a mysterious flame, stopping both the bleeding and the pain, and a jewel warmly pulsed in the palm of his hand, its rhythm in time with the heartbeat in his chest. He had sovereignty, self-governance, he had courage, and he was inspired, as well as he had the prior resonance. He had all the requirements, and thus this is why his vision was granted. Next is Klee, and Klee had obtained her vision at a very young age, and according to her herself, she had created a bomb that was even bigger than super big. And this was her very first solo project. However, it didn't go as expected, because it only exploded her entire workshop. Despite the fact that her experiment didn't go as planned, as well as that her workshop is now nothing more than a smoking pile of ash, she wasn't really disappointed. In fact, she was more inspired to make even better bombs. This is when and why a vision had then materialized in the very ashes itself. So what exactly happened here, right? Well, she does have self-governance, she does have sovereignty, and she does already by default resonate with the Pyro Resonant, which means that her very first project, her very first bomb and explosion must have terrified her, but at the same time, she was in awe of it, and it inspired her. And this is what granted her her vision. Now, I know what some may be thinking, that she doesn't really have self-control because she's always exploding things. She exploded a mountain, for crying out loud, and changed the very landscape itself, right? She's a dangerous individual, so you may think she doesn't have self-control. But again, you have to realize that it's not self-control in the eyes of everyone around you. It's your personal version of self-control. So Klee blowing up an entire mountain and changing the landscape of Mondstadt is her having self-control in itself, which is crazy if you think about it, because imagine if Klee didn't have self-control but somehow still managed to have the Pyro Vision, which wouldn't actually work. That means she would just be like, I don't know. I don't think there would be a Mondstadt. Anyway, this is how Klee obtained her vision. Next is Hu Tao, and in Hu Tao's family she has a long line of prestigious lineage of being funeral home directors, and when the current one, which was Hu Tao's grandfather, had passed away, he wanted Hu Tao, which was at the age of 13 at the time, to perform the ceremony for him. Not only did she later become the funeral director herself, as well as she handled everything herself and arranged everything to the highest standards, so much so that even the undertakers themselves were greatly impressed by her. However, that very night she crept out in the dead of night to the place in between places, the boundaries between the living and the dead, a place where some souls wait for their relatives, as well as those with unfulfilled aspirations linger. Hu Tao went to this place in hopes that she would get one last chance to see her grandfather before he would depart forever. She had journeyed for 2 days in search of her grandfather, passing by countless spirits. However, she couldn't find him, till she finally was so exhausted she would fall asleep in this place. She was only awakened because there was a few spirits who were clapping and laughing at her, asking her what is she doing in this place? What is she looking for? Is she thinking she's gonna find her relatives in this place? In a mocking manner. Unswayed by their opinions, she carried on day after day searching for him, and almost completely out of the rations she had packed for this journey. Until an old lady gazed upon the exhausted Hu Tao. She smiled at her and spoke, then said, "You're just as stubborn as your grandfather." And she told her that none of the people in her lineage of director ever linger in this place, so that she should just return to her normal life for now. And then she bid her farewell. Hu Tao began to leave with a smile on her face as she realized that her grandfather likely had crossed over the border as soon as he got there, because he had no unfinished business. He had an open and honest life, leaving behind no regrets. When Hu Tao finally got back home and unpacked her bag, she realized she had already obtained the Pyro Vision, and it was in her very bag. However, she's not exactly sure what was the precise moments of the vision being granted. What was the exact action? I think perhaps the accumulated series of events is what granted her a vision, and not just a single action here. Next is Zhangling. She has this strong belief that you can make a delicious dish out of pretty much anything in the world at all. Slimes, lizard tails, anything at all can be turned into a delicious meal. However, this turns off a lot of people because they get scared or intimidated or disgusted. However, she still persists, she still keeps carrying on, she still keeps trying to make these dishes. This is why she got a vision. But why exactly is this happening? You may think that she just doesn't care about people's opinion, but that is not the reality of it because of how this vision works. So she has to be kind of terrified, kind of scared of other people's opinions and their take on her meals, but she's making them for people. So she wants people to enjoy her meal. She wants people to love it. She wants people to taste stuff that's good, but she's scared of their opinion. So her pushing and trying to get people to eat it is courageous, is brave, because she could just simply just make normal stuff that people would try without being afraid. She also fits all the criteria for being a Pyro Resonant as well, because she is serious and calculated and cautious in making her meals, and she's extremely passionate about it, as well as it does inspire her. All of these things are fitting Pyro exactly, so this is why and how she obtained her vision. Next is Xing Yang, and she never really fit in Liyue Harbor. She only really found herself through rock and roll. and so she wanted to share this with others. However, the people of Liyue didn't know of rock and roll, and so she thought she'd show them. And so she'd practice and practice and practice in hopes that she could become good enough to show Liyue. However, the people seemed to hate it, and so she thought about quitting. However, then she thought perhaps it's just that the people of Liyue don't get it, so maybe she should move somewhere where rock and roll is more appreciated. However, wouldn't this be running away, she thought? Wouldn't this be betraying the spirit, the resonance of rock and roll itself? So instead, she decided that she will be the flame to light rock and roll in Liyue. And so she added sparks and explosions to her performance. This would not only lead to many of her instruments being destroyed, but also to her getting burned herself quite a bit. However, she endured and continued to practice every single day. And when she finally felt she got it and performed perfectly is when a boiling hot Pyro Vision materialized on her final stroke. And this is how she obtained her vision. Next is Choma, and he fell into service to the Kamisato clan as he felt he needed to repay a debt. However, there came a point in time where the clan was falling apart, and who was going to be the next successor was in question. At this point, he was given the option to opt out and go back home if he wanted to, therefore he wouldn't be wrapped up in all of this. However, he had received countless favors from the clan, so though he could have just went back to his ordinary, easy, stable life, he would have had guilt and regrets. He believed that if he left, he would lose his loyalty and his righteousness, and his father had always taught him to be a loyal and righteous man. He also believed that now more than ever Ayaka and Ayato needed him, and therefore he wasn't going to abandon them. Him stating these very facts granted him his vision. So he must have been afraid of this new life that he was going to take on for the rest of his life, as well as it inspired him the fact that he realized his new purpose in life, his new goals for the world. He's living up to what his father had always taught him, as well as he's being loyal to his newfound family. This is what granted him his vision. Next is Yoimiya, and she got her Pyro Vision when she took over her father's fireworks shop. That very night she couldn't sleep at all, so she just kept researching until daybreak. So what exactly happened here? I think it's a recurring theme that Genshin is doing, where when you're coming of age and you have to take on this big responsibility, and therefore your life is going to change, and it is scary and overwhelming, and so facing this is courageous, and being inspired by that at the same time. It is what Pyro needs exactly to unlock their vision. However, it's not going to work for everyone. Like I say all the time, you have to already be resonating with Pyro, and Yoimiya is definitely resonating with the Pyro Sephiroth. Anyway, she is intimidated by it, and she is inspired by it. She thinks that other people think that fireworks are like a fleeting heartbeat, but to her, it's memories that will bloom forever in their hearts. She has extreme passion for this, so she is inspired and in awe of this, taking on this task, this mission for the rest of her life, as well as probably to honor her father and her father's shop. So it is overwhelming, it is scary, she does have passion for it, she's inspired by it, she has all the requirements, and so taking on this task granted her the vision. Next is Janfei. Janfei is like a lawyer. She studies and tweaks the law constantly. She believes that there cannot be structure without laws. However, she wants people to live as they please, as long as they don't overstep and take away other people's freedoms. It doesn't exactly say how Janfei attained her vision. However, given the information from Gnosticism about this Sephiroth, we can come to a pretty accurate assumption, I believe. For instance, we already know that she has a lot of passion for the law. She's serious, calculated, and cautious. She has strength in boundaries and sets limits. All of this is shown in her characteristic. However, though it's not stated, like I said before, I believe something like this must have occurred, which is something along the lines of her witnessing an injustice occurring triggered anger, violence, aggression, and wrath, likely wielding the law as a weapon to strike down the hammer of justice upon them, will then show self-control. All of this is completely within her characteristic, as well as it paints the picture of the Pyro Sephiroth itself, and it would explain how her vision is obtained. Something like this had to have occurred for her to obtain this vision. Next is Dia, and she's not really sure when her vision first appeared. However, she assumes it must have appeared sometime when she first started walking her own path. During that time, all of her thoughts were completely consumed with her growing stronger. As a mercenary being weak wouldn't be able to take on enough commissions, therefore they wouldn't make enough mora to even eat, which is this Pyro pattern repeating in Genshin. When you're coming of age and taking on all this responsibility and stuff, it is scary, so it's understandable why Genshin keeps repeating this pattern, because it works. Dia, however, probably has the hardest coming of age story For instance, she may die out there if she fails, unlike the others who have at least some kind of safety net. I don't think I need to even explain why Dia is passionate and angry and violent and aggressive, but serious and calculated and cautious. She has strength for boundaries and limits, but self-control. Her resonance with Pyro is very strong. And how she obtained her vision, like I said, it's the pattern repeating itself. She was intimidated, but in awe of her new life, and she had passion for it. She was inspired to take on this role. And this is what granted her vision. Finally, at least for now, is DLuke. And it's not really said how DLuke obtained his vision. However, you can speculate that it has something to do with following his father's footsteps, because DLuke lived to honor his father. And his father had always regretted two things in life. One, that he never got to become a knight, and two, that he never obtained a vision. DLuke wanted to please his father, so perhaps taking on this task is what granted him his vision, because he did become a knight, and he did get a vision around the age of 10 if the comics are canon. Why am I making the speculation that DLuke may have attained his vision like this when there's no breadcrumbs leading up to this? It's because he has extreme passion and he's inspired to do this for his father, to pick up in his father's footsteps and do what his father couldn't do. He's inspired to this. He has extreme passion to this. He lives to honor his father. So yeah, I would think that this qualifies for it, and it would be intimidating. It's scary, as he doesn't want to disappoint his father, and perhaps he feels he may not even be able to make it further than his father did, kind of thing. So I would say it is brave to try this. It is courageous. This is why I feel this is likely the reason how he obtained his vision. Anyway, that's about it for now. I still got a few more characters to explain how everybody unlocked their vision, as well as comparing that to its counterpart Sephiroth. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you next time.